This is A New Angle, conversations about how we're doing and where we're going. I'm your host, Justin Angle. This show is supported by the Headwaters Foundation, First Security Bank, and the University of Montana College of Business.
Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Suzanne Tillman. I'm the Dean of the College of Business here at the University of Montana. I am so excited for the Gilkey Executive Lecture speaker today, featuring Logan Head. This series was established by Harold and Priscilla Gilkey in 2004 to enrich business education by providing students, faculty, and our community members with direct access to business leaders. Harold and Priscilla unfortunately cannot be here, but we want to acknowledge all of their support. So if you could just join me in saying thank you to Harold and Priscilla Gilkey. So, our speaker today is Logan Head. He is a serial entrepreneur, founding his first business at 19 years old. He is the co-founder of Whatnot, the largest live shopping platform in North America, the UK, and Europe. In spending a bit of time with him over the last day and a half, I have been impressed by his dedication for excellence, his hunger for continuous learning, and his ability to understand strategic opportunities and implement them. Today, Whatnot spans hundreds of categories, with buyers forming connections and driving more than 1.5 million daily transactions. Tonight's lecture will be moderated by Professor Justin Angle, host of A New Angle, which is broadcast by Yellowstone Public Radio and Montana Public Radio weekly. And he's one of our outstanding professors of marketing. So everyone, please help me welcome Logan Head.
Thanks, Suzanne. Thanks for being here, everybody. Logan, thanks for joining us tonight.
It's awesome to be here. Pretty surreal because the last time I was at campus was when I was a student.
Yeah. So let's start with, where did you grow up and what did your parents do?
Yeah, so I grew up in Scottsdale, Arizona. My mom and dad divorced at a young age, but the cool thing about both of them was they were entrepreneurs. I think my whole family came from an entrepreneur background. So an example of that is my grandpa. He took his company public. My mom started a winery in California, and then my dad started a construction business. And so I think I got a lot of the love and sort of understanding of what it's like to sort of build a business through sort of my family, and I'm very grateful. I said I grew up in Arizona, but I also moved around as a result of my family. So my mom moved to California when she started her winery, and I moved out there as well.
And so is starting a business just something always on your radar screen? Did you envision yourself as an entrepreneur sort of from the start?
Yeah, I really looked up to my grandpa, specifically when he took his company public, and it was something I really wanted to do.
Excellent. And when did the University of Montana become a place that was interesting to you?
So I love the outdoors here. I love to ski. Transparently, I was not a great student. So, I didn't have a lot of options in the University of Montana. It was fortunately one of them that I can get into. When I was in school, I would be doing things that weren't school related. So I was fortunate enough to be really into computers as a kid. And so through that, I taught myself how to code. I was building things on the side and not going to school. And with that, I was very fortunate enough to get accepted here, and I chose here because I love Missoula. I like the town. I got to visit it. I also love to ski. And so that was a big motivation for me.
Excellent. Although you left and went to New York City to get into the startup game. Talk about that shift from the university. We'll get back to the why did you leave the university.
Okay.
generally that move to New York City from Missoula, that's got to be big.
Yeah, I remember day one stepping off the plane, moving there from Missoula, and it was a pretty cool experience for me. I've always loved New York City. I wanted to live there. I visited there a couple times as a kid. I think the interesting thing about New York City versus a place like San Francisco is there just is so many different types of industries, such as finance, tech, you name it. And when you go to San Francisco, it's just all tech. And so I wanted to surround myself around everything versus one thing.
Did you have a plan when you landed and got off that plane? Like, who were you going to work with? Like, what was the plan?
Yeah, so I was actually at school here and I interviewed for 10 companies in a period of 2 days. So I flew out there and I was working with a recruiting firm, and luckily I was able to land interviews. And so I think I had pre-interviews here, like through the phone. There was not Zoom at the time. And so like initial phone calls, and then I went out there to do a series of interviews. I got a few different job offers, and then I ended up working for a particular company that I wanted to work for.
And then were these all in the startup space?
Most of them were. Some of the jobs that I interviewed for were not.
Okay.
And so what I was actually targeting when I was out there was really early stage companies, because I think that's the best place to learn. If you're working for the FANGs, the Facebook, the Apples, or the Googles, you're really siloed into doing one thing really well, versus when you're in a startup, not everything's going well and you're solving a lot of different problems and wearing multiple hats. And so I figured if I go down that path, I'm going to learn a lot more. Obviously, if I went down the sort of big company path, I would have learned more about like better business practices and operating rhythms that you just don't have at sort of the stage of the startups that I was working for.
And so eventually you land at GOAT. For folks in the audience who don't know what GOAT is, just tell us about what that business is all about.
Yeah, so GOAT was a sneaker marketplace. The way they sort of evolved their model, which was pretty unique for marketplaces, was they authenticated every product. And so sneakers back in the day was a really big thing. I think as an industry today, it's kind of been on lull. It's not as, like, there's fads that happen. But it was a pretty disruptive thing. I worked for a company before them that they acquired called Flight Club, and Flight Club actually pioneered the whole resell of sneakers game, and I think GOAT sort of disrupted it in a different way. There was also another company called StockX at the time, where they made it accessible for anyone to buy and sell, regardless where you were, versus Flight Club being a consignment model, and you had to be based in big cities like Miami, Los Angeles, and New York City to sell. But you could sell anywhere.
Was there something about these marketplaces that were interesting to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at marketplaces and the business of a marketplace, so they're probably some of the most iconic businesses in the world. Airbnb is a marketplace, DoorDash is a marketplace, and they're extremely hard to get off the ground. You really have to sort of figure out how do you solve the supply and the demand side, and you usually have to start with one, and that first one is harder to do than the second one. And so from what I've been told is marketplace businesses are one of the hardest ones to get off the ground, but they're the most stable ones. So once you get one off the ground, I'm sure people still use eBay. To me, I think it's a legacy, ancient technology. It's a piece of shit, but people still use it. It hasn't been disrupted in years. And so, but people still use it. It's growing. I mean, their market cap isn't great, but yeah.
And so at some point along the lines, you and your partner Grant decide to launch a business. Talk about that genesis moment. When did it become like, hey, we're going to do this? And was it, we're going to do this before you knew what you were going to do? What was the order of operations there?
Yeah, so we both, my founder and I, we both met each other in New York City. And I think the cool thing about us is our skill sets complemented each other. So he had more of a background in marketing and business operations, and my background was more in tech. And so we felt like those skill sets was something that was really good to get something off the ground, because like I would never want to be a CEO. He's a great CEO, and that's just not what I'd want to do. But I think, you know, we just had the drive to one day leave our jobs and do just that. And I do remember the moment we did decide to do that. And it was our first trip to Japan, and we were very jet lagged. And we walked off the plane and went to the first bar that we can go to and had an old fashioned. And then the conversation just kind of came up, was like, you know what, we need to leave our jobs in the next few months and start a business. And we knew we wanted to build a marketplace at that moment. We didn't know what it would be. We had a couple ideas, and it eventually evolved to what it is kind of today, or more or less the hypothesis around Whatnot, which is, if you think about marketplaces, commerce-based marketplaces, eBay, Mercari, Craigslist, StockX, Goat, it's a really boring experience. You go there, you search for a product, and you buy an item. But if you think about the people who are going there and buying these items, they're part of communities who share a passion around products. And so how can we build something that really blends commerce around sort of the social aspect of those communities?
And I've heard a version of the story from Grant in an interview where he said, we're committed to being user-centric, to move fast,
Yep.
and to take big swings. Can you talk about those three sort of founding principles, if that's an accurate description?
Yeah. I think they were really defined from our previous work experience of what went well and what didn't go well. He's worked for startups. We also worked for a couple of big companies like Google and Facebook. Versus me, I worked for earlier stage and growth stage startups. And I think what we learned was, why did some of these startups do well? Why did some of them do not so well? The user-centric side is very clear in some of my jobs that I was in before. Those companies are not around anymore, but they weren't talking to users. They weren't getting the feedback. It was like, I'm building this product because it's what I want. It's not what the world wants. And I think it's really important to do as much as you can to talk to your users. And we actually make everyone at our company talk to users. It doesn't matter what department you're in. It's still a principle. Always listen to our users. And like every week we have all hands. We bring users in, and it's a live Q&A that's moderated like this. And it's a lot of fun, but I think it's really important because you're going to identify problems that you probably didn't think about and how to solve for them. And then taking big swings. Yeah, I mean, we've taken a lot of big swings at the company. We initially started, our app initially was completely different than what it was today. Yeah. It was an app that I thought was kind of working, that didn't get the traction that we have today, but it was a marketplace, and we did have people buying and selling. And so we started out with these things called Funko Pops, which are sort of these little vinyl pop figurines that
who
very
knows
popular.
what a Funko Pop is? Raise your hand.
Cool.
So like a third of the audience.
Back in 2019, there were more Funko Pops being sold than comic books, and we both went into comic book stores and saw there were more Funko Pops in comic book stores. And for us, that was kind of weird to see because we didn't expect that. And then really digging deeper into the community and talking to the community, it sounded like it was very fragmented. You're going everywhere to do the thing you love, which is collect Funko Pops and share it with your friends. You're using Discord groups, Facebook groups, buying on Mercari, but nothing really brought that experience together. Yeah. And so we started with this sort of social app, kind of like eBay, but there was a more social component where you can share your collections, you can follow people, you can like things, like you want this product and you can tell the seller you really like it, but the whole community sees that. And that actually worked pretty well. But one of the things we identified was a lot of our users were going off platform during COVID to sell products in a way that was not intended. And what they were doing is they were using Instagram Live to sell products where they would use this auction-based format where there would be a physical timer in the background counting down from, 30 seconds to 0. People would place a bid through a comment. And then if you won, because the countdown timer went to 0, you'd actually go, as a seller, have to reach out to that buyer and say, hey, what's your Venmo? How are you going to pay me? And then also, what's your shipping information? And so we solved through that. Even though our users were using our product, but our users loved this other shitty way that they were selling things through Instagram that wasn't intended. And so we started to talk to some of these users, and they're like, if you could build it within your app, that would be amazing. Here's my pain points. And so I locked myself in my room for 6 weeks and came out with the very first version of Live. Grant sold $5,000 worth of products in an hour and a half. And then we decided at that moment we're going to become a live shopping company.
Talk about that time that you were locked in your room. Like how how hard a problem is this from a coding perspective? For somebody that hasn't coded or doesn't really know the technical bits, like how hard a problem are you trying to solve?
It was pretty hard for me because the components of a live auction and having people bid in real time was difficult to solve. So imagine 50 people in a room bidding on the same item, and how do you make that experience really good for all 50 people? Everything needs to be in sync. So a good use of WebSockets and being able to scale that data very quickly and send it to, all the information to whoever's bidding and so forth, or whatever they need. And then on top of that, you have video, where how can you make video real time like Zoom, where you're really talking to someone? Back then, Instagram Live, there was a 10-second latency between me and you when they were doing this. So the countdown clock was 10 seconds delayed, but people still loved that experience. And so it's important to get that going. Getting the live video component up, we've re-architected that 3 different times at Whatnot. Principally, we've always built things that have never scaled to start. And so what I mean by that is we wanted to build an MVP. I'm not going to over-architect the engineering side of things, meaning, it's going to be kind of spaghetti code, but it's going to work, and it's not intended for the future. Like today, it's intended for the present. And by that, we were able to move incredibly fast by sort of being able to iterate quicker versus sort of like, how are we going to make the best deployable infrastructure to AWS? We weren't focused on that. We were focused on write code quickly, validate it in front of users, and then see what happens. To this day, people are still fixing my shit. And so, and that is a problem we don't regret. And it is a problem that most companies face today and continue to face, and tech debt is always a thing. But I think, it is a good problem, and it's something we don't regret. So when your point about big swings and talking about that, we took a big swing because at that moment, we changed our business entirely and became a live shopping company. So that's an example.
And so at what point did you gain sort of admission into Y Combinator? Talk about that.
Sure. For those of you who don't know what Y Combinator is is a startup accelerator where they will write you a check. I believe back in the day, they wrote us a $200,000 check, and now it's $500,000. And it's a 3-month intensive boot camp on generally startups who have an idea or might have a soft product that they've launched, and really trying to get it out into the market and thinking about how do you sort of get traction, how do you get to product market fit. Some of the most iconic companies in the world have gone through Y Combinator, so Airbnb, DoorDash, Coinbase, Reddit. Sam Altman from OpenAI used to run Y Combinator, and so it's a pretty special program. I don't know why we got into it, because we're a Funko Pop company, but somehow we did, and so yeah.
And just tell us a little bit about that experience. What was it like to be with other folks trying to bring their dream to life, grinding? You get an expertise. You sort of feel like you're on a runway of a sort.
Yeah, it was an interesting time because this is right before we went in the winter batch of 2020, so this is COVID.
Oh, geez.
And we were really excited. We thought, we're going to be surrounded by a really great set of peers, but not just peers, people who have started companies helping advise us and know the things to look out for. It was intense. It was really intense. So it was every day nonstop from 7 in the morning to 1 in the morning, with the exception of group office hours where you're with your group partners. Group partners come from a background, and they were previously in Y Combinator, and they either took their company public or sold it. And so they have had that experience, and they've lived that. And so you're paired with 2 to 3 group partners, and then you're also paired in that group with 3 other companies, and you meet on a weekly basis. And every week you're setting goals. And then you have to go next week and say, did you hit your goals? And you're around your other peers. So I'm like, oh no, I didn't. I think we're going to pivot our company. And so you kind of talk through all these problems as a group, and it was very intense, but it was very rewarding, and we don't regret it. I think it was such a good experience, and if anyone does have the opportunity to do it, they should do it.
And so was the Y Combinator experience, did the switch to live streaming precede Y Combinator?
Yeah, so when we were in Y Combinator, we're still that Funko Pop marketplace that
Okay.
did not have live shopping. That came maybe 4 months after the batch. And so yeah.
And so probably a good time to talk about product market fit. You mentioned that a moment ago. First of all, what is it in your conception and how do you know when you found it?
Everyone has their own definition of product market fit. My definition is when your company becomes an absolute shit show. And your company becomes an absolute shit show because you're growing so much and you don't know how to solve the problems immediately and you need to hire and there's one problem after another. I think that's product market fit.
Okay, so talk about the moment where you found it.
Yeah, so it's probably 4 or 3 months after Grant went live for the first time. The way we sort of scaled that experience and allowed other sellers to sell live was we actually put everyone on a wait list. And we gradually opened up the wait list. As the tech would improve, it would scale more. But also we wanted to make sure the experience from like a discovery aspect worked really well. So if you open up the feed, what do you see? Can sellers actually add products? At the time, the very first version, there was no functionality to add a product into a stream. I had to do it through the command line. I remember our very first seller gave me an Excel sheet of the products that they wanted to add and sell. And I uploaded it for them because that UI functionality did not exist. So, we had to build the features to be able to scale that. And I think it was probably right before Christmas 2020 when things really just started to become a shit show. And we needed as much help as we can. People were begging us to get the live access. The people that did have live access were streaming more than we expected, selling more than we expected, and we didn't want to cut it off. And so it was a really interesting time.
And in that time, you've built this thing. You built it with the intention of solving the problem for now, not for the future. But then you've got this problem of, okay, we have to make this thing scale to the volume that wants in the door now. Probably need to ask for help from others, hire folks, whatever. Like how's this process of opening up this thing that you locked yourself in a room for so long to build to the help of other people?
Yeah, so one of the things we did, and I think there's pros and cons to doing it, but we are a venture-backed business. I don't recommend raising venture capital for everyone. I don't think every business should do it. But we raised our first sort of official round. It was $20 million, and that was really helpful because it allowed us to be able to hire people and be able to pay really good salaries and have benefits and so forth. And so I think that was one thing that did help us scale that. Two, we had to cut a lot of things. So I think when there is a lot of things on fire, you have to pick which are the ones that which fires you want to let burn and which ones you want to put out. And so it really comes down to ruthlessly prioritizing the things that matter. And that's really a hard thing to do from a judgment standpoint, but you just have to kind of go with it. Mm-hmm. And so hiring is really hard too, just because for us, we want to hire the best people. Our first hires actually ended up being people that Grant and I worked with. So we were very fortunate to be able to do that. And it was incredibly hard to convince them to come to this live shopping Funko Pop platform. However, some people use the product and they're like, oh, this is kind of cool. I see where this is going. I'm going to leave my really good paying job at Facebook and come over here. And that, we convinced a lot of people to do that. And so we're very fortunate for the first 10 hires because they were mostly people who worked with us. But scaling beyond that, it's really hard to find good talent. And Grant and I have always made a principle that things can be on fire, and that's okay, but we're never going to make it, we're going to try our best to not make a bad hire, because if we make a bad hire, things will become more on fire. And so we didn't rush hiring. We were very rigorous on who we would hire and who we would let into the company.
Let's focus on growth for a moment. You started in the Funko Pop space, and were deliberate about how you chose to go into other marketplaces, other regions, etc.
Yep.
At the same time, Whatnot's been described as the fastest growing whatever in a bunch of different ways. So how do you what's your philosophy around growth? How much, how fast, what are the guardrails?
It's a good question. I think it depends. So, your question around category expansion and growing, that was sort of the first move. We wanted to sort of say, hey, we're not going to become this Funko Pop company. How do we become collectibles? And now we're beyond collectibles because you can buy everything from plants to handbags to your seafood that gets delivered the next day from the fishermen off the dock. But we had to start small, and where we started was really focusing on the collectible side of things. And the first few categories that we launched were TCG and sports cards. Sports cards was incredibly hard to get off the ground. But within a year and a half, it became one of our biggest categories. And the reason for that is because the type of users that we had on our platform were kind of like these geeky collectors, me being one of them, who liked Funko Pops and Pokemon cards. No one really liked to collect sports cards. That's just that's just the nature of it. And most people were male. And so it was really hard to get off the ground. I think we luckily cracked it and got it off the ground, and it became a massive business for us. In parallel to that, we were like, okay, well, if we're a male-dominated app, we need to invest in female categories ASAP, because this is going to take a while to get off the ground. And so our first sort of non-collectible category that we got into was women's fashion, and that took a long time, and now it is our biggest category.
And what are the hinge points on it taking a long time? Like, is it convincing the sellers that they want to be on the platform? Is it convincing buyers to engage with a streamer trying to sell them stuff? Like, what are the pain points there?
Yeah, so when you enter a brand new community like women's fashion, and then let's just say I open the app and I just see sports card streams, why would I want to go on this product? And so it is a game of patience and a game of trying to convince people. I would effectively call it sales. And we're knocking on everyone's door trying to get them to go live and use our product. And for the first few users using our product, where we don't have a woman audience and not having the sales that they think that they would make is a hard thing to solve. And so I think it really came down to a lot of iteration, partnering with the right types of sellers who saw the future of live shopping and were willing to stick it out and help us grow the audience while we help them grow the audience, and not giving up on the problem. Because I think if we gave up on it, people will say, oh, it's not growing, it's 3 months in, it's 6 months in, what are we going to do? Should we pivot? Should we start a different category? That's the thing that would have probably ruined the business, is giving up too quickly.
So you mentioned a few moments ago fresh seafood, which you don't really associate with a place that you buy sports cards or Funko Pops. That's a recently new market. You bought the first piece of seafood. How did you convince that fisherman to sell on Whatnot? And then just talk about the steps of supply chain and logistics and all the things you had to figure out to get that thing from the dock to your door in 24 hours.
It's a great question. So I think the interesting thing now for us is we've reached this sort of scale where launching a new category is easier and easier. And we've gone through the grind of getting something off the ground and it taking months to work. Our go-to-market team, so this is actually a project I worked on, and we sort of compiled a list on other marketplaces like Goldbelly and so forth of like, who are these high potential, trustworthy sellers? And let's aggregate a list of them and then start reaching out to them and tell them about what we're doing and how much more money they can earn by selling something on Whatnot versus their sort of static e-commerce store. Because if you're a user and you're buying fresh products, you probably want to know where it comes from and the story behind it, and reaching and going to a website and reading about it in one paragraph probably doesn't do justice, and you want to see it visually. And so Gray and I have been very bullish on this category, and it is in its beta phase. We're not letting anyone just do it. But if you open up our app, go to the fresh food category, you're going to see a lot of new sellers. Very first seller was actually a user of Whatnot. And he reached out to us on LinkedIn as we were actually thinking about launching seafood, and was like, I love your product. I want to sell all the fish on Whatnot. And we're like, okay, cool. You want to do it next week? And so that's how that came. And I love seafood. It's one of my favorite foods, but it was pretty cool because he was bringing things off the dock from all these fishermen. And I bought 2 spiny lobsters, this fish that was, I don't know, 2 feet wide.
Big.
Yeah, and it tasted delicious. It came to my door the next day in Big Sky, Montana. So that was pretty cool.
So what you're describing is a bit of a flywheel, right? Like you've hit a critical mass where sellers are now approaching you. How do I get on the platform? How do you set guardrails around growth? What do you say yes to? Why do you say no to things? And what are your kind of decision rules around those things?
Yeah, so we do set guardrails around growth, and we have intentionally halted growth at certain points in the company just because we didn't have enough bandwidth to scale the company for the growth. And so it's a really hard decision, but I think it really comes down to users and what's the best thing for our users. So if I'm a user and I'm complaining about something and it takes me 3 days to get a response from whatnot, that's unacceptable. And so, if we're compromising on the user experience in any way, we will slow down. And what I mean by slowing down, it means, we're going to not open up categories as quickly as we can because there's an infinite amount of things I want to sell, like wine, liquor, and beer, cars, all this shit. We're going to have that soon. But we can't do that if we can't support our current users today. And so yeah, I think it really comes down to, is it compromising the user experience in any way, and can we deliver something that's excellent?
And so as you grow into all these categories, what will continue to set the platform apart? What will be your distinguishing characteristic that makes sellers in any category want to be on Whatnot? And buyers, for that matter.
From a selling perspective, I think it's really interesting. We just released a live shopping report, which sort of analyzed all the data that we sort of know about live shopping in the industry, and really using our own data internally to make that report. It came out a couple weeks ago. But the types of businesses that use Whatnot range from everything. It's from someone who's in their garage and they start using it and love it and then end up quitting their full-time job, to brick and mortar stores like golf shops all around the world selling used inventory or new inventory to brands. And I think it's a pretty cool thing. So I think it affects everyone. From a buyer perspective, it's kind of like, it's really fun. You go there because not only are you passionate about the products and the communities, but you want to learn about new things, and you want to engage in the community and be entertained. Our average user spends 80 minutes a day on the platform, and so I would equivalent it kind of to Netflix, because you're learning and you're hanging out with your friends, and on occasion maybe you're buying something that you really love, and I think that's pretty special.
So you're kind of hanging out in the store. Like, it doesn't seem like a place where people go to buy specific things, or maybe it is, but it seems like you've created an experience where people just want to be hanging out and they're going to buy stuff along the way.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of like a mall where you go hang out with in high school, and you're going with your friends to go shop. That's sort of what it is.
And you mentioned culture a moment ago, and hiring being really important and really hard. Step us through like the number of people you've added and how fast, and then we'll get to some of the ways you make choices in that space.
Yeah, so we have about 1,000 or a little over 1,000 people at the company right now. I think we hit 1,000 a month or two ago, and so that's a little scary. But hiring is really important to us, and culture is very important to us. I think, what Grant and I did really well in the beginning days was define what do we want and what are the types of people we want to hire, and how do we want to operate the business. And with that, we really sort of came up with 10 principles. And we believe culture is a set of actions and not a set of beliefs. And so through that, we operate pretty unique compared to other companies. I think any company you go to, there's going to be differences in culture. And so it's really important that we screen for the right people. We don't hire too fast. And so we do have actually a principals interview that everyone has to go through. And we only have certain people at the company that can do this interview. They have to be vetted. We have to know how they're going to interview this person. How are they at the company? Are they a top performer? Are they a culture carrier? Because I think, when we bring people on, people want to work with great people, but if you're working with mediocre people, I think it's just going to become a mediocre company because you're not going to be motivated to do the right things. You're not going to work hard. It's just going to become a boring 9-to-5 job. This is not a 9-to-5 job. It's much more than that. And that's what we expect in our employees. And we want people who are passionate about what we're doing, the mission that we're solving, and incredibly smart, talented people who are nice. And that's hard to find.
Yes, you mentioned that there's only a set number of people in the company with the authority and training to hire. At some point between it being you and Grant to it being the 1,000 people or roughly that it is now, there's probably a moment where there was a moment where you didn't know everybody in the company. Talk about that. Was that stressful? What's it been like to be witness to this growth and have this thing that's sort of taken on a life of its own that you steer in a way?
Yeah, so for the first 150 hires, Grant and I interviewed every single one of them, and then that just didn't scale. And then now we approve every offer. And so any offer that comes, we have this channel on Slack, and someone on the recruiting team shows us everything from the feedback and the interview panel and their references, and then we kind of go through it. And unfortunately, we don't approve them fast enough, and so our recruiting team is nudging us a lot because it's a lot of people that go through, and we don't approve everyone.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think in terms of hold on. What was it was.
Oh, just what it's like.
Yeah,
as
so what
a
it's
leader
like.
in the
Yeah, so
business
like
to
going
have
into
all
my
these people you don't
going
know.
into the office now, it's weird. I don't know everyone.
Yeah.
I used to know everyone, and that was yeah. I remember I was in the San Francisco office a few days ago or last week, and I probably knew 40% of the people in the office, maybe 30.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I remember one day too, someone asked what I did, and that was pretty funny. So yeah.
What did you say?
I said, I work on our international business and expansion, and I'm one of the first employees here. He's like, oh, okay. So
All of which are true, I suppose.
I think someone asked that to Grant too, and I think that's a little suspicious. But
Yeah. You do a weekly all-hands meeting.
We do.
A distributed meeting, 1,200 people every week. Like, that's an expensive hour. Why is it important? Why do you do it?
We do it because, so actually maybe let me back up. Before this, I used to go to a company in our all hands as every quarter, and they would present things that I thought was just irrelevant. And an example of that is, they would give very high level stats on growth and how the company is performing, but it really lacked a lot of transparency. And so for us, we've actually had a weekly team meeting since the very beginning of Whatnot with just Grant and I, where the first week we would align on priorities, and then we recheck next week. Do we hit our goals? What are we doing this week? And then that just evolved to adding more and more people in the company to that, which was everyone, to an all hands every week. And so we never sort of lost that. The reason we do it is one, we're not a huge company, but we are a big company, and there's a lot of context that needs to be gained, and you can't just do that by asking your peer. Like, you need to know what's going on in the company. So our team meeting this week, we did a few things. One of them, which I think is pretty cool, is we went through the board deck. What did we present to our board members, which has everything about the company, our financial data, and how much cash is in the bank, how we're growing as a company, what are the things not going well for our company. And we think it's important to give as much information transparently for people. And so everyone will get a link to that, and they can browse through it at their own time. But data and having access to data is really important, because if you have access to all our data, you can identify problems very quickly. More than likely, if there's a problem in the business, it's in data. And so giving people tools like DataBot is a sort of AI chatbot that we've built internally, where you can say, hey, I want to know what's happening in the UK, weekly GMV retention cohorts, and it will spit out the SQL query, and it'll spit out the data. And anyone has access to it. Doesn't matter what role you're in, if you're in customer support or if you're in finance or product, you can find anything about the business. And we think it's important even to show the lowlights, which we've always done.
So you've had a couple rounds of funding. It used to be just assumed that IPO was a step out there that a lot of startups aspire to. IPOs aren't necessarily what they used to be, but talk about that as a potential destination and what you might, what choices you have, what you might have to gain and give up on the way there. Some of the transparency you mentioned in those all hands might be on the table.
Yeah, you can't disclose everything if we go public. And I think that's the beauty of being private for now. In terms of us going public, we don't have a time frame for that. I think it's probably our only option at some point to do, because I think we're at the stage where an acquisition, nor would we want to do something like that. There's very few companies that could do that. And so, yeah, I think, for us, the benefits of being private is, to your point, transparency. 2, I think we can move faster. 3, we don't need to sort of appease to the public markets and the sentiment of the public markets. We can do the things we want versus every quarter having, an earnings call and sort of orienting the whole team around that versus kind of what's best for the business now. And I think what's best for the business now is remaining private.
So racing toward IPO is not necessarily a state of being that you want to aspire to.
No, I think we may eventually do it. It just has to be the right timing, and we'll want to, we want to make sure everything is set up to do that when that happens. But there's a lot of great companies that are out there that are still private, like Stripe.
So you're back here at the University of Montana. You live in Big Sky, so it's sort of a arm's length away, but talk about the experience of these last few days. You chose to leave as a student, but you're back. Just talk about that relationship to the education experience, and your thinking about that, having been invited to speak and so forth.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome to be back, so thank you for having me. Visiting the students, it was pretty cool just because I was there and I got to meet some students that did remind me of myself, specifically yesterday in like the entrepreneur group, which was pretty cool. But I think being a student is tough. You have to learn a lot, and then you have to figure out, what am I going to do? And I'm going to find a job, and the job market today is interesting. It's always changing. I was impressed with some of the subjects that the students are now learning. When I was a student here, we were taught, as an example, Visual Basic, which to me was a very outdated programming language, but now everyone is learning Python, which is great because it's universally applied to AI. Statistics, you can build a web app on it or any sort of back-end system. And so I think that's pretty cool to see some changes being made. And then also the use of AI, I saw a lot of emphasis on that and how can we adapt to the changes, because every 5 or 10 years, things change in the technology world. When, the past 12 years that I've been in it, every 3 or 4 years, there's different things that are happening, and it's a lot to keep up to date. And so I think it's cool to see that the university has done a good job at trying to do that and setting up their students for success. What I would push on here for everyone is that all teachers should aspire to be great, and we should aspire to have the best curriculum out there. And so rather than positioning your curriculum around specific companies, why not position your curriculum around the best companies? And by doing so, those other companies make by doing so, that makes the student, I think, more employable at those companies, even the great companies. And so that's the thing I would sort of push the teachers and everyone on. So
at dinner last night, you talked about the importance of finishing things. Yet at the same time, you chose a moment to leave your degree incomplete to go start a new thing. I'm sure in your journey as a founder, you've chose to persist in ideas and abandon others. How do you make choices about finishing things? When's it right and when is it not?
It's a very hard question. Intuition. With the university, that was a very tough decision. I think I had 3 or 4 classes left to graduate. And I do regret part of that decision, mainly because what I've learned in the work industry is that the best people tend to finish things. And so an example of that is when we recruit people, we look at the jobs and the jobs they've held. Have they been at this job for 6 months and then went to another job for 6 months? that just is an indicator that one, maybe they're unhappy, or two, they're not a great performer. And so we really look for signals like that. I think generally finishing something, I used an example of fashion and getting that off the ground and how it took a very long time to do. I would say most companies would have given up within 3 months, but we didn't do that. And so I think it's very important to give it your best shot and do it as long as you sustainably can do it. And if you think it's the right moment, but we knew this was kind of a make it or break it. We didn't want to be just a male-dominated collectibles app. We wanted to be and apply to everything. And so we had to do whatever it took to do that. And yeah, I do think a lot of it is intuition. You just need to know when to stop too.
Well, that's probably a good time for us to transition to questions. I'll stop
Let's do
asking them. Audience members, we got some time for questions. If you have one, raise your hand. I'll bring you the mic. I'm trying to record it, so please use the mic.
All right, so my question comes from core values that founders tend to imprint upon a business a set of core values that guides decision-making for the rest of the life of the business. And so I was curious what kind of core values you brought into this business, whether it's based on religion or philosophy or family values, any of those.
It's a good question. The core values really came from our experience in the past and the things that we've learned in the company we want to shape. And so a few of our core values, I kind of mentioned one of them, which was always listen to our users. That is a core value that we instill in our entire company. Everyone has to talk to users. Everyone has to use our product because they have to understand why people are using our product, what's working, what's not. And so with that, we actually goal everyone every 3 months, and we have a leaderboard of how many stuff have you sold, because you have to sell, you can't just buy on our app, you have to use all components of it. And if you're not doing it, we're going to rate you in the performance rating because you didn't go live. It doesn't matter what position you're in, we don't care. You're not following what our users need. A couple other ones that we have is set crazy goals. Gray and I have always set really crazy, outlandish goals, and sometimes we hit them, sometimes we don't. But I think if you set low goals, then people are just going to do the bare minimum to hit those goals, and so you have to set things that are unachievable. And we've hit a lot of these unachievable goals, which is very surprising. A lot of times, that I think it just motivates people to do their best work and work a little bit more versus less to do the bare minimum. So those are a couple examples, but yeah, principles and culture and how we sort of instill that, it's really dependent on the principle, and we have 10 of them.
Logan, a quick question for you. I know one of your interests, you are really interested in education, and you have a passion for young people and mentoring and that kind of thing. If you, based on your experiences, your professional experiences, as well as your experience at the university, if you could design an entrepreneurship program, like at the University of Montana, based on what you've seen, what would it look like?
I was actually talking about this today with someone. If I were to do this, if you think about a semester, you're electing a bunch of different classes. So I might need to take my data analytics class, my intro to MIS class. I think if you could dedicate a semester entirely into building a business end to end and really going through an intensive boot camp to do that, kind of like Y Combinator, that would be pretty awesome. How I would do that is I would blend certain things that exist in the world today. So there are these things called coding boot camps where you can learn how to program in 3 months, and it is a very intensive program where you're not just doing the normal day-to-day that you would in a university. It's much more than that, but you're learning the fundamentals of everything in one. So if you want to build an application, there's the infrastructure to host it. There is the database. There is the backend, which is, we can use Python as a backend. There is the front end, such as a web app, which is usually JavaScript or iOS or Android. And so really giving people a deep dive into that and sort of encouraging people to solve a problem through technology and doing a very intensive boot camp, I think would be a pretty cool thing, and also getting credit for it, because right now, you're teaching different things, but it's all fragmented. I don't see how it all comes together. And so if you can sort of build something from the ground up that all comes together, when all these different things that are important in businesses and technology, I think it'll really be a great thing for students, and they also would probably be more employable.
Other questions? Kale.
Hi, my name is Gilkey Lecture. My question is, how many offices do you have across the country? You mentioned you had an office in San Francisco.
Thanks, Kale. How many offices? Yeah, you mentioned the San Francisco office.
Yeah, we have quite a few. So the way we work is we're more or less a hybrid company, and that's evolving over time. So as you know, we initially started as a completely remote company because we were born during COVID and offices weren't a thing. But we have multiple offices. I don't know the exact count. We have one in Seattle. We have one in LA, San Francisco, New York, Arizona. I think those are our sort of main offices in the US. And then we have a few in Europe, the UK, Dublin, and Ireland. Or sorry, not Ireland, Poland, Krakow in Poland, and also Berlin. And then in Australia, we have one in Melbourne and one in Sydney. And then we're opening up one up in Japan. And I hope to open up one in Bozeman very soon.
My question is around the principles, if you're willing to expand on what those principles are. The idea that you're interviewing for fit in a lot of ways for the team, I think is fascinating. And my follow-up to that is, do you go live, and what do you sell?
It's a good question. So I think culture is always evolving, and it should change, specifically the stage of the company that you're at. And so, our principles actually have evolved. We have changed a couple things just based off of the time and so forth. And so I would say we probably will change some more principles, but most of them probably generally stick regardless of how big the company gets. Do I go live? Yes, I do. My most recent live, I called it an experiences show. And so this was more of me testing something because I'm very curious about new categories that we can get into. It was a charity show that I did just for the Whatnot employees, where you could win different experiences. Those experiences ranged from a big sky ski vacation to a golf trip to a Michelin star restaurant. And that was really fun. Raised a lot of money for the Big Sky Hospital down there. And so that was what it was for. And I think it raised about $25,000 in 30 minutes. But they were pretty cool experiences though that we were auctioning off. So, but yeah, I think, I do go live, and I try to do different things when I do go live.
Oh, she's got a follow-up.
I'm fascinated. I'm a user, which is probably a bad thing and a good thing.
Okay.
I think the social space is amazing, but the idea of nonprofits and exploring that avenue, is there a bunch of nonprofit pieces with it, or is that a future thing?
It's probably a future thing. I haven't seen actual nonprofits use our platform, but what I have seen, and we do have rules and regulations around this, where we have to vet, and actually there has to be proof. So if you are going live and you're saying you're donating X amount of money that's raised to this charity, we have to vet that just because there's some trust and safety aspects to that. I think it would be a really good platform for charities to use, specifically because we have millions of users, and it's a great way to connect with people, talk about causes, and so forth. But I just haven't seen it.
Hey Logan, you were in my class today, and I had a student come by afterwards, so this is that question actually. It's like, Logan's really driven, loves what he does, but what makes him happy?
Skiing. I'm very fortunate enough to live in Big Sky. When I mean Big Sky, so I'm there probably about 5 or 6 months out of the year, and then we spend time in different hubs, but it is the winter season, so I'm here. The house I live in is right on Big Sky, so I can just go out my door and get on the slopes and ski for a couple hours and go back to work. And I think that's a really nice thing, and I'm very lucky to be able to do that. But that's what makes me happy. And sometimes traveling, depending if it's I haven't done a bunch of work travel back to back, and then personal travel after that. I do like to travel. So.
Yeah, you talked a lot about hiring today, which I thought was really cool, and a little bit about AI. And I'm kind of curious how those two are going to intersect in your mind in the next coming years of business. Heard a lot of tech leaders, especially in the AI space, talk about how they think that AI is going to replace a lot of jobs that a senior like myself are looking for, and how your company kind of deals with that.
Yeah, that's a good question. And there was a question I had from a couple of the classes the past couple of days. My sort of thing with AI is, if you look at historical technologies like the internet, everyone thought that would replace a lot of jobs, but it just created different types of jobs. The same is going to be the same for AI. It will probably replace certain things, but it will create different types of jobs. And so I think it's really important that people adapt and learn as much about the technology as they can. It's not just writing prompts from ChatGPT, it's actually going very deep into what's behind and what powers ChatGPT. Maybe create your own LLM from scratch if you can do that. I think that's the thing that's going to make you pretty employable. In terms of our company, we leverage AI everywhere. We actually make every employee use it. It's a requirement because we think that they're more efficient. We've done surveys at the company to sort of ask feedback from different departments. Is AI making you more efficient? And the answer is generally yes. And so we're strong proponents of it because we think we can operate the business much more efficiently. And so, yeah.
I think we have time for one more. Ned?
Thanks, Logan. Quick question. What's your percentage of, I guess, sales between users that are individual sellers versus brands, if you segregate that way?
Sorry, individual sellers versus what?
Like brands.
Okay, yeah. So brands has never been a focus for us. We've always targeted small to medium-sized businesses. And so the percentage of sales compared to brands, I don't know the exact amount. We're this year making more of a focus on medium-sized brands versus kind of the large-sized brands like Nike and so forth. We see a lot of brands just organically use Whatnot because they see it as a sales channel. They also see it as a marketing channel. So if I'm a brand and I'm going live and I'm talking about my product, it is a free acquisition channel versus spending money on paid marketing. But this year we'll probably make more of an emphasis. I don't know the exact sort of figures, but we do have quite a bit of brands that are using the app today, selling on a daily basis, and have created their own live shopping studios and have employed people specifically to live stream on Whatnot all the time.
Excellent. Logan, thanks so much. This was
Thank you guys.
a wonderful
Appreciate it.
conversation. Congratulations on all of your success. You've made a mark here at the University of Montana and the College of Business in just a couple of short days. You've made a huge impression on our students, our faculty, and everybody in this room. So we really appreciate you being here and donating your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, guys.
Thanks for listening to A New Angle. If you like what we do and want to support us directly, please consider a subscription at anewanglepodcast.com. A New Angle is recorded at Studio 49, a generous gift from UM alums Michelle and Lauren Hansen. Our presenting sponsor is the Headwaters Foundation, working side by side with Western Montanans to improve the health of our communities. We are also supported by First Security Bank and the University of Montana College of Business, with additional help from CED, Drum Coffee, and Montana Public Radio. Keely Larson is our producer. Libby Riddle is our production assistant. And finally, John Brownell, Jeff Ament, and John Wicks made our music. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time.